So this episode is about normalizing the weird, calming the panic, and reminding you that bodies are not robots and they do strange things sometimes. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that sounds right. That's a really good intro.
Grace, we had such a great reaction to our last episode when you were on, and people clearly want answers when it comes to sex, but still a bit mortified in asking them. Why is that, do you think?
I think, if you don't hear people openly saying, oh, this is something I struggle with, our human kind of brain can just go into that mode of, oh, but I must be the only one. I think the more we talk about it, like with this, like with other podcasts, anything, I think hopefully over time, the less shame there will be.
Yes.
It's just, if you can see people in the media or even in your real life talking about this stuff a bit more openly and a bit more vulnerably, then I don't think we would feel as ashamed.
Okay, so more podcasts like this.
Yeah, you have to keep at it. Keep at it.
100%. And where do you think the fear of being abnormal actually comes from?
Yeah, I mean, if you strip it right down, like as humans, we're born with an inbuilt fear of rejection. Like it's there for survival. Like if you look back in human history, not as quite literally today, but before you would literally need to belong to a tribe or a clan to survive. You'd starve, you'd die of exposure. Like we had to group together. So being rejected was obviously a life or death situation, like in the animal kingdom. Now it's not quite as visceral, we wouldn't starve to death instantly if we were rejected, but it is that inbuilt fear of others perceiving us negatively and rejecting us. So really, I think that's what a lot of it revolves around. It's not just I'm weird or I'm abnormal. And what will that cause? Like what will be the effect of that? Will people reject me or not want to be around me or see me differently? Whereas at the end of the day, rejection is kind of part of life, isn't it?
I suppose
rejected now and then.
Absolutely. And it happens all throughout life.
Yeah.
But I suppose you just reminded me there, it kind of makes sense as to why it's so important for people to find their tribe, because you mentioned that word, whether that's a sexual preference, some sort of kink. And people who I've interviewed on this podcast, they tend to find, it's very important for them to find their tribe in some way. Their people, whether it's online or whatever, and they find this group of people who are like them because they're out there. And that's just in us, that we want to belong to.
Exactly.
Something, right?
It's natural. And you see that whether it be something, positive, like someone is into a certain kink and they find that community, or someone has a particular issue like vaginismus or endometriosis, and then they find their community. And it's all just, seeing a bit of ourselves in each other and just knowing you're not alone. It just, that does so much work, just knowing we're not alone.
And I suppose that's one of the big pluses of social media, that we can find our people.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I think with social media, you can find, again, people with common issues or interests, but also you can find information. You do have to be careful, obviously, because social media is so unregulated. And, for example, anyone could call themselves a sex coach. It's not a regulated term. So my dad could call himself a sex coach.
Really? I didn't know that.
So you have to be careful about where you're getting your information. But overall, I think if you've reasonably good media literacy skills, social media can be a really good place to learn and to feel a bit less alone. But it also then, on the other side, does introduce other pressures you've probably never thought about.
Yes, comparisons and
exactly
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What's something people think is rare that you actually see all the time?
There's so many things. Most of the things people come to me with are so common, but they don't feel that. Say, differences in libido or lower libido. Libido, I think I mentioned last time I was on, is probably the number one thing that gets mentioned, which is so common. Things like difficulty orgasming, erection issues. Also, people, particularly women, coming to me and saying, I don't know what I like. They'd be like, Grace, you'll think this is crazy because I have 3 kids, I'm married 20 years, but I couldn't actually tell you what really makes me tick sexually. And I'm always like, that's not crazy at all. That's really common.
Yeah.
I mean, let's change it, but it's common. We're not, I don't think we were brought up to really embrace sexuality as this part of our life that we can go and learn about and,
upskill.
Explore and upskill. Yeah. So and we didn't talk about it again, so there's a lot of silence. So that's something that comes up a lot where people are like, you're going to think this is weird. And I'm always like, I'm not going to think it's weird because my job.
Try me.
I never, exactly.
Try me, yeah.
Yeah, so very common.
Okay,
Really.
interesting. Right, okay, let's get into it because we have had a lot come in for you. And here's one that came in and it says, why do I sometimes feel like I need to pee during sex, even when I don't?
I don't know, is this from man or woman or what their anatomy is?
They haven't said.
Yeah, so like, I'm going to answer as if it's a woman first of all, right?
Okay.
So, like if you look at our anatomy, the female anatomy, you have the vagina, you have the urethra,
Yeah.
and you have the clitoris. They're all very close together. Like they're all next door neighbours. And if we're having sex and if there's a penis in there or a toy inside the vagina, whatever, it can put pressure on the bladder, on the urethra as well. And that can feel like you need to pee. Also, you've probably talked about this on the podcast before, like squirting happens for some women, that you can get that feeling sometimes before a woman squirts. So it's just that needing to pee. But it's not peeing. Like it's a different thing that's happening if someone squirts.
Okay.
But, you know, in some cases, again, this could be depending on who's asking. If you actually think it's a continence issue, like actually peeing and it's urine, you know, that's something to get checked out with a pelvic floor physio. But I feel like usually it's just that build up and just the areas that are getting stimulated. And look, sex is messy, you know, there's fluids, there's liquids, there's all kinds of things. Yeah, put down you can get special like splash blankets now they're called, and like that absorb like any liquid. If it is a man or someone with a penis riding that wouldn't be as common to feel you need to pee.
Okay.
Because the anatomy is so different. So again, just something to get checked out if it's
checked
bothering
out.
you. Like, yeah.
Just speaking of peeing, I was probably in my early 30s when I found out the importance of peeing after sex.
Yeah.
Sorry, and before sex. Isn't
Yeah,
that wild?
Yeah, I've been through a few UTIs when I was younger, and I was like, I do not want that to happen again. So yeah, I suppose for anyone listening again, vagina and urethra, next door neighbours, right next to each other. So if you're having sex, any kind of sex, like if you're touching yourself down there, again, something's going inside the vagina. I think even like shaving, like anything where you're around the vulva area, bacteria can pass into the urethra. That can cause a urinary tract infection. But if you pee as soon as you can afterwards, like not necessarily immediately, it depends on the person. Some people are very prone to UTIs, but it helps to flush out any bacteria that's passed in. So yeah, handy tip.
There we go, handy tip.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Is it normal to suddenly feel emotional or want to cry after sex?
It's quite common. I've been asked this a lot. There is an official term called post-coital dysphoria.
Okay.
But really, when we think of sex is very intimate. It's very vulnerable, especially if you've had an orgasm. There can be a sense of release. And our bodies are emotional. You know, our emotions aren't just in our mind, they're in our bodies as well. So sometimes after sex or after an orgasm, you could feel really emotional. You could get teary. That's not necessarily a bad thing unless it bothers you or unless you're actually getting distressed afterwards. So if someone... that could be a trauma response in someone if it's kind of specifically triggering something. But if you've just like, I've just had great sex and now I feel a bit emotional, that's kind of okay.
Imagine the sex being that good that you start to cry. I mean, that's the
Sobbing afterwards.
That's the dream, really, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, that was so amazing. It's a fair play to you, I think. Keep that going if it's not triggered by trauma or anything like that. Okay, here's another one. Sometimes I lose sensation halfway through, like I go numb, this person says. What's going on? That could be a lot of things, right?
It could be a lot of things. I would say again, like I'm always going to say, if it's something that's worrying you and there's a real lack of sensation across the board that you're struggling with, I would again get that checked out. A pelvic floor physio is a great place to start. But generally speaking, I'm kind of doing a bit of assuming here, right? But usually when I hear that question, it's from a woman and it's in relation to penetrative sex usually. That basically inside the vagina, it can all just feel a bit numb after a while. So if it feels good for a while and then it's going numb, it's kind of like with a lot of parts of the body. If it's overstimulated, we can just go numb. So kind of switching up the different types of stimulation, switch up the position, the angle, maybe swap in a toy for a while. It's kind of just seeing what works. Sometimes people as well, if they touch their clitoris for too long, it can get a bit numb. It's just, that's what kind of the body does. But like, again, if this is a new thing that's happening, or it's like, oh no, I feel numb from the get-go, there's no sensation, then definitely get it checked out.
You mentioned pelvic floor physiotherapist.
Yes.
Do you need a referral to see one of them, or can you just go and see one of them? Because a lot of
yeah.
can you go and just?
Pretty sure you can go privately.
Okay.
Almost certain.
Okay.
Double check it, but I send people, a lot of time when people come to me, I might say you could do it, just seeing a pelvic floor physio and ruling out any physical stuff that's going on. And I send them a list of websites, and I'm pretty sure all of them can be accessed privately. Okay. But ask your doctor for a referral if you want to go that way.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Can a gag reflex be tamed over time?
What is this question in relation to?
I wonder. Absolutely no idea. I'm just thinking of my friend who gags every time she smells eggs.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'm sure this is completely
very negative,
different.
Association.
Yes.
I'm going to assume it's in relation to giving oral sex or giving blowjobs specifically. So everyone's anatomy is different, and some people have very weak gag reflex. Some people it's really strong. I'm not an expert in the throat anatomy, but yes, like people can train. A lot of people can train theirs if they really want to. You can kind of desensitize it a bit with different techniques, learning to relax the throat. Learning to kind of adjust your breathing, even trying different positions when giving oral sex. I think the bottom line is, though, only go and put the effort into doing that if it's something you really enjoy and want to do,
Don't do it for another person is?
Not just for their pleasure, if it's making you really uncomfortable, because it's not a pleasant experience. If that's someone now with a really strong reflex who actually feels like sick or feels pain, no one wants to be feeling that.
No.
So there are techniques you can try, but just check in with yourself as well and make sure you feel okay with what you're doing or being asked to do. Because you can give a perfectly good blowjob, you can perform oral sex perfectly well without, going right back someone's throat, basically.
Absolutely. There's other things to do.
Exactly. And that's what we see in porn a lot. It can be very aggressive. It can be very, and look, again, each their own, adults, each their own. But yeah, short answer, generally it can be worked on over time. But yeah, decide for yourself if you want to do that.
Okay, good answer. I feel like my partner just doesn't desire me. Our sex is good, but I always have to initiate. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. I'd love to feel wanted without forcing it. How do I bring this up? Could something like low testosterone be a factor? I'm a woman, he's a man, if that matters.
Yeah. So the question about low testosterone, hormones do affect libido, but they're not the be all end all. That's what I would say. Often we jump straight to, is it the hormones? It's worth getting it checked. But often, that mightn't be a straightforward answer because desire is psychological as well. So what I would be saying there, if the sex is good, first off, that's great.
Yeah.
Because that's actually really a good sign and that's very promising. What we're talking about here is who's initiating. I find in most couples, there's usually one person who initiates a bit more. But what I'm hearing is that person, though, isn't really feeling desired because their partner isn't initiating. So the first thing I would say is there are other ways for your partner to make you feel desired apart from initiating sex. We want to feel seen outside of the bedroom as well. So compliments, touch, kissing, flirting, all of that makes you feel seen and desired outside of sex itself. But when it comes to initiating sex, you just need to talk to your partner and ask, I find that I'm initiating a lot. Is there a reason you don't? What's going on for you there? Again, it sounds like once it gets going, it's great.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of it. To be that's really good.
I suppose if communication, if they've gone this far and they're feeling like this and they haven't said it, and communication is generally a lot of the issues.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Grace, is there baby steps? Instead of sitting down, look at them and saying, you need to make me feel more desirable or, I don't feel like you desire me. Is there little baby steps they can do before they get to that stage to initiate communication.
Yeah, if you're not really used to communicating much and you want to communicate more, which hopefully everyone does, because it's so important. Absolutely, baby steps is the way to start. I think first of all, thinking about, how comfortable are you communicating and what fears are coming up there, and spending some time on that. Thinking before you go into a conversation, articulating what is it actually you're trying to say here? Because sometimes then when we get into the conversation and emotions might come up and we can just kind of lose the run of what we were actually trying to say to begin with.
Yeah.
I would say regular check-ins is a good place to start. Just relationship check-ins. So even myself, my partner, we'll try and sit down about once a month and we'll be like, what's going on with you? How was the last month? Not even just sex, just generally. How are you feeling? What's going on for the next month? Is there anything I can support you with? Just kind of a check-in. And then over time, start to build in the question about sex and intimacy into that.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
How would you feel about if somebody was to write a letter, for example? Because they might find that easier because they can get their thoughts down and then,
Absolutely.
Get rid of it.
Whatever way you start is probably where you need to start. I think writing a letter is, if you think that would help you get out what you're trying to say and, giving it to your partner and just saying, look, I'm giving you this because, I just want to lay out exactly what I want to say.
Why you've written it. Yeah.
And it's because you love them. It's because you love them. You want to be you want to stay in this relationship with them. You care about your relationship. That's why we're having these difficult conversations. And I think when we go in with that energy of, this isn't me criticizing or complaining, it's me. It's a bid to look after our connection and our relationship.
Relationships are hard work, aren't they?
They are very hard work. That's the thing. They really are. And what I will say is, not really relating to maybe this person that wrote, but in general, relationships are hard work. But the right relationship will feel like it's worth the work. If you're putting in work and you are seeing progress or change, even if it's slow, great. Whereas if you're in a relationship that mightn't be the right one for you, you can put in work for indefinitely. You can work on it forever. Will it ever get to if it doesn't feel like it's actually getting there or worth it, that's when you need to start questioning,
is this the right person?
Is it,
Yeah.
Like, not instant progress, but you should feel, if you're working on a relationship, if you're working on your communication, you should feel over time that it's going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. Is it normal for sex to feel amazing one day and then just okay the next?
Yes.
Of course it is. I mean, I can answer that and I'm no expert.
Go for it.
Absolutely. It's great sometimes, it's bad sometimes, it's messy sometimes, it's romantic sometimes. I mean, that's the best thing about it, isn't it? The variety.
Yeah. It's with sex, we have to think about context. What else is happening around it?
Yeah.
And that's going to impact the experience. How am I feeling my body that day? How are my stress levels? How is my connection with my partner right now? What setting are we in? Are we on holiday or are we at home? Or there's so many factors that go into making a sexual experience what it is.
Yeah.
So it's normal. Now, if it can be amazing, I think it's always good. It doesn't have to be amazing every time, but always trying to, if you're in the middle of a sexual experience, you're having sex and you're like, this just isn't really, I'm just not really in this. It's not great. It's okay to stop it and say, I'm not really feeling this today. Maybe we can try, is it go back to kissing, or we could try a toy or try something else. That's also okay to do.
Watch a Netflix documentary.
Yeah. just stop it all together and Netflix and chill. Honestly though, it doesn't have to be amazing all the time, but I would say don't be kind of passively moving through experiences though that aren't good at all, because that kind of confuses your brain and body then of
Is that a big problem, that we become too passive and let things slide?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah.
And let things go, so to speak, and let bad habits form.
Yeah.
Or not bad habits, it's the same habits, because we all have our go-tos, don't we?
Yeah.
We all have our things that we do in the bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's always good to have those go-tos as stuff that that works.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, we know that this works. So if we get to the point where both of us want to finish or, climax, we know what to do. But that doesn't mean we have to go straight to that all the time. There is time before that to try something new. Novelty is important. The brain likes a bit of novelty. So have your go-tos, have your kind of old favourites. but like do experiment in a way that feels like, comfortable but exciting
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
My partner is essentially mute during sex. I encourage him to describe how it feels, tell me what he wants, but I think he just gets in his head. I'd love him to tell me I look great or just be a little more dominant. Could this just be his personality or can it be worked on?
Yeah, the silent sex. I know.
Is there a lot of them?
I don't know. There is, like, I mean, everyone's different. How we learned, again, sex is a learned behavior. It can just be someone's personality where they're just not a very vocal person, not a very communicative person. But like it is important for a lot of people, like for that connection to have, like some people are really into talking during sex and dirty talk and all that. Some people are like this person mute. A lot of people are in the middle as well. It could be just his personality, but it's definitely something he can try and work on if it's something that's really important to the person who asked the question. How do you work on that is the thing. You kind of have to look at why is someone so quiet during sex? Is it just that they're so wrapped up in the moment and they're really in touch with the body and the pleasure and the physical side of it that they go to that place in their brain?
Yeah.
Worst case, are they dissociating? Are they disconnected from it? Like I'm kind of missing a bit of information here over, like she knows her or they know their partner better than me, right?
Yeah.
If it is just that, they're quite shy and it's just not something they've done before, trying to kind of introduce it in a way that's not super porny or performative, where, say, for example, if I want him to say, oh, you feel amazing, like asking, does this feel good or how do I feel? Like just giving prompts and that kind of can give someone the language to respond to the prompt, if that makes sense.
Yes, because the language is important.
Yeah.
You get it right.
Yeah, I know, and you can get it really wrong as well. So
Yeah.
there could be a conversation outside of sex where you're like, these are things I really like to hear during sex and this is why I like to hear them, and how do you feel about that? It's like, again, with the comfort zone, the only way to expand it is to be a bit uncomfortable. But it is...
That's okay to be uncomfortable.
Totally. And it's for you to kind of notice, okay, being a little bit outside my comfort zone is great.
Yeah.
Being like miles out is probably not going to feel good. So it's for him to kind of figure out, where can I start, with communicating more.
And I suppose you can start with him maybe sending some text messages that make you feel good.
Yeah.
Before you get into the throes of passion, and maybe that will
Absolutely.
instigate it as well.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Where is a good place to start with sex toys for a 67-year-old woman who has never dabbled?
Oh, I love this. I've helped so many people pick out their first toy of all ages. And I love hearing someone that's, is that bit older, who's interested in it. Because it's never too late. Pleasure is pleasure. You can have it at any age. The best place to start is start quite simple. I would say, what do you already do? So, for example, if you masturbate in a way that you like to touch yourself, touch your clitoris with your hand, what you could get is a clitoral vibrator. I know Jenny Keane was talking about finger vibrators, I think, when she was on. Something like that is actually a great starting point because it's not this big intimidating thing. And it just, it's on your hands. You can touch yourself. It's not a million miles from what you already do.
Okay.
Or kind of a toy that could be versatile is a G-spot vibrator, because G-spot vibrators can be used inside the vagina to stimulate the G-spot, and usually they can be used on the clitoris and outside as well. So you kind of get a bit of a, okay, well, if I don't like using it this way, I could use it this way instead. But yeah, there's don't get intimidated by it because there's loads of stuff out there. But generally, if you go to, I know I do a good bit of work with PlayBlue, and if you go onto their site, they do have like beginners and like they have lots of information.
Oh, they have a beginner section?
I'm pretty sure they do. Or even if you go into like, again, like clitoral vibrators.
Yeah.
It'll be all in one section. And I have a section on there about things I recommend. So like there is information if you just go and look. But yeah, just don't get overwhelmed. Yes. And have fun.
And have fun. And
have so much fun.
Things.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn a few new moves, this person says, sex moves. But honestly, I don't know where to even start. Could you recommend any or point me in the right direction? Where to find some?
I love moves, sex moves.
Sexy moves.
Yeah. Well, this is the joy of the internet again. There's so much information on there. A good website that I do send a lot of people to is Oh My God Yes. OMG, yes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, I think even Emma Watson was talking about it at some point, like it's a really well-known site, and it's really about female pleasure, and it's not through that male gaze of kind of performing, you know, like a lot of mainstream porn would be. I think that's a great place to start. There's a lot of different kind of techniques and kind of, yeah, really technical stuff there.
And what are your thoughts now on a lot? I just feel it's my world at the moment. Friends and people I know, and
Yeah.
maybe it's women of a certain age, getting into audio erotica and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on all that stuff for women?
I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. We have for way too long only seen sexual media through that male lens. Like growing up, you know, you think of it, your Playboy, your Page 3, you're
Yeah.
like, it was all like through this lens of, and a lot of that doesn't appeal to plenty of men as well, by the way, you know, but it is a very male lens that we learned about sex through. Now we have sex toys made by women for women. We've audio erotica. I'm a huge fan of audio erotica. Oh my God, I love it. And there's all these different apps. And there's like even the app Quinn is probably the biggest one out there. They get huge names on doing stories and that. So it's really taking off the romantasy kind of smutty books as well, let's call them. Like, I just think, and I don't like to use this word unless I really mean it, I really think it's empowering. Like, I really think it's empowering for women to be able to access material that turns them on, but doesn't make them feel bad about their bodies or degraded or like objectified in a negative way. So I'm all for it.
And if someone feels that they're in a bit of a sexual rut, let's talk about, you know, maybe women going through menopause or which can happen, as we know, we're talking about quite often now, which is great.
Yeah.
Doing stuff like that without pole vaulting, you know, and over the line and, you know, buying a massive vibrator or whatever is like the audio erotica and the audio and stuff like that is kind of a gentle way into finding their sexual self, so to speak. Is that a good way to start for women who've maybe lost their way to find their way back or get back to where they've never been before?
Absolutely. To kind of reconnect with that part to yourself.
Yeah.
100%. Like, it's kind of thinking of keeping, you know, with a TV or whatever, keeping it on standby. Like, your sexual self, it doesn't go away. It can kind of quieten down for a while there's other stuff happening. But it's still there. It's still part of you. So it's figuring out what helps you kind of reconnect that a bit. Audio erotica, it has been brought up a lot in my sessions as just something that women have been like, do you know what? I thought I'd hate it. I actually really like it because it's so varied as well. You can listen to all kinds of things. Or again, the books, the spicy books. Also, your relationship to your body, just maybe touching yourself. Again, not in a way that, as you said, the whole like jigs and reels and massive sex toys, just even touch yourself with your own hands and your own body. But yeah, the reason we use the word erotic is the erotic concerns the brain and what turns on the mind. So turning on your body is great, but you have to engage your brain and your mind. Do you know what has come up so much is Heated Rivalry, the show. Okay. So women, even though it's a show about like two men and their relationship and it's very sexy and whatnot, but women are so turned on by it. It's come up so much in my work.
Let me just write that down.
Heated.
So it's about
seen it.
No.
Oh my god. It's very saucy, but it's also beautiful. Like, it's really good.
Is it made by a woman by any chance?
I actually don't know. I think it's
out.
based on a book by a woman.
Okay.
I'm 99% sure of that, but it's just an example of how, isn't it so interesting that women are like so horny for this show with two men? And it's like there's something in that because there's a story, there's tension, there's all this happening. And because we're so used to seeing women be kind of like just this visual object of desire on screen, if that's removed, it kind of frees up space to be like, oh yeah, I've nothing to do with this story. I'm not in it. There's no woman in it. Does that make sense? So I can just observe it and be like, oh, that's really sexy. It just has come up so much.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I love to hear it though.
And I suppose it's important to check in with ourselves as well, because what turned us on in our 20s or 30s is not going to work the same now. Physically, we're different. Emotionally, we're different. And if you're with a partner 20 years or whatever, that relationship has grown in many ways.
Yeah.
So the check-in with yourself is very important as well. Is there any questions that you think would be a go-to question to say to yourself if you're being on top of your sexual health?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know I've just sprung this on
that's
you now, so
okay.
take your time.
That's okay. Well, one of the most common questions I ask everyone I work with, which sounds very strange, is why do you have sex? Why? Why do you have sex? What does it bring to your life? Because often we hear, oh God, like, it's, if it gets to that point you're feeling like, it's a chore or it's something you should do or it's something you must do, we've gone off track a bit because it shouldn't really, ideally, we don't want it to be like that. So I'm always asking, why do you have sex? Like, what does it bring? What does it mean to you? What does it bring to your life? And that seems like a very simple question, but it's actually quite complex. And you can spend a bit of time thinking, okay, well, makes me feel maybe good in myself. It makes me feel connected to my partner. It makes me feel feminine or excited or, I'm not going to put words in people's mouth, but if you can answer that, that's a really good starting point. And you know what? If you right now hear that question and you kind of think, I kind of do it because I kind of should, it's okay to be that honest because you actually have to start from that honest place. If you've slipped into that place where you're kind of just having sex, the word obligation comes up a lot in my work, where you kind of feel, because you kind of, again, it's kind of the done thing.
Yeah.
You should. You deserve more than that. Sex should be, again, it doesn't have to be incredible every single time, but it should be a positive presence in your life, not something that you're stressing and worrying over all the time.
And that is a very good point. Absolutely. And lastly, I just want to ask you, because I've just read Katrina O'Sullivan's book, Hunger, and it's all about women's relationship with their bodies.
Okay, great.
Very interesting read. I won't give too much away. But a lot of the things she was saying, even though came from very different backgrounds, a lot of things she was saying and doing, I was like, oh my God, I completely relate to that. And I'm sure a lot of women do, that there's always this thing with our bodies. We have a lot of women have a very turbulent relationship with their bodies. We're always trying to shrink ourselves.
Yeah.
There's parts of our bodies that we like. If I compliment one of my friends, their go-to response would be, oh, would you stop?
Yeah.
I don't. We can't take a compliment. We can't love ourselves enough.
Yeah.
We just can't. Is that a problem with our sexual well-being?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think,
it makes us self-conscious.
Yeah. As in, is our relationship with our body or our inability to even take a compliment and be...
I think our relationship, what I'm trying to ask is there ways and baby steps we can get to a place where we're loving ourselves more physically? Because I think a lot of women have hang-ups. A lot of people, we all have hang-ups about our body, but I think women especially. And we can be quite unkind to ourselves when we're looking in the mirror and nitpicking at ourselves, and we're always looking at things we can improve. That must have an effect on our sexual well-being.
It does, and particularly as women, we are thought to tie our worth and our desirability to our appearance. That is the messages we receive, basically the hotter you are, kind of the better you can, it's exhausting. Like, it's exhausting because there's the body image stuff and then there's the face stuff and the aging, and it's just relentless. It is exhausting. So you kind of have to make a decision at some point that, like, to unsubscribe from a certain amount of it. You just have to take the power back into your hands, I would say. Try and detangle this idea that I have to look a certain way to experience pleasure and desire and all of those things. You don't. That's all made up. You can experience pleasure at any size. You can experience pleasure whether you have wrinkles on your forehead or not. That's all literally just made up to sell us things, right? Yeah. So it's hard, but if you say kind of tiny steps, you gave a really good example there of if you compliment someone, they're like, no, my God, they say thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because, you should say thank you. If you can actually rewire your thinking over time with small little actions that challenge the deeper beliefs. I started doing that a few years ago. I don't always do it. But if someone says you look beautiful, I've just tried to say thank you and actually just leave it at that. Because if you're saying, no, oh my God, I look disgusting, you are feeding that back into your subconscious brain that you look disgusting. You know, we have to really look at all of those little actions and the things we're saying about
The little things.
What it is, and they do add up. You know, look into radical self-acceptance, you know, again, small acts of, whether it be, I don't know, if it's wearing like a bikini to the beach or something, right? I know that could be a huge deal for some people. But if it's something where you used to be comfortable with it and now you've gotten in your head and you're like, oh, now I can't, and blah, blah, blah. If you try even one day to just do it anyway, that kind of face the fear and do it anyway, you don't have to be 100% comfortable all the time, but you're showing your deeper self, you're proving to your deeper self that actually I can. The world didn't end, nothing happened. It's all made up,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
It's hard, I get it, but
very good tips.
We have to push back.
We got to push back, absolutely. And we'll all have better sex.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Grace, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.